the other person could have, let's say, a red mark or a scratch. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is David Kohlmeyer, the Problem Solver. Thanks for joining the Problem Solver show. Today, we're going to have an amazing guest on the show talking about estate planning, wills, and trusts. Again, I'm Dave Kohlmeyer, retired police officer of 17 years. I worked in the Henderson Police Department. I worked in the New York City Police Department. Actually, today is July 1st when we're filming this. Actually, 23 years ago to this day, I actually was sworn in as a New York City police officer. So it's been quite some time. And now I'm basically helping people solve problems as a retired police officer. I have tons of resources, tons of attorneys. We actually created the Las Vegas Legal Network to help people to get attorneys, that basically people that need help. So today we're going to be talking about wills, trusts, and estates, which is a big topic. A lot of people are not prepared for the future, so we're going to be talking about that issue. We have a Problem Solver app, which is theproblemsolver.vegas. My phone number is 702-400-7474, which is 24/7. Any problems, any issues, any legal matters, please call me, the Problem Solver. Anyway, thanks again for joining us today. Here today we have an amazing woman, Larissa The Esquire, attorney at law, and she is here today to talk about something that's very special to her and dear to her in regards to the work that she does every single day in Las Vegas, wills, trusts, and estates. Larissa, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm laughing because Larissa actually had me on a radio show basically about maybe a year and a half ago, and what she was doing on local radio, and I found it very interesting and was looking on radio and podcasts and different things. So it's funny now to turn
the tables have turned.
Exactly. And
now
so
I'm a guest on your show.
So I appreciate it because technically you are probably one of the reasons why I'm sitting here now interviewing.
Wow.
You. So
I feel special.
You're very special. So anyway, so tell us for the people, again, this will be aired out all over the place, different Facebook groups, social media, Instagram, all that good stuff. For the people that are listening and watching, basically tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am an attorney, as you mentioned, and what I specialize in is estate planning, which is wills and trusts, power of attorneys, healthcare directives. And a lot of people, they get a little nervous when they hear the word estate planning. So basically how I describe estate planning is determining how you want your affairs to be managed when you're unable to manage your affairs for yourself, either due to your incapacity, so coma, car accident, out of the country, missing, or due to your death. Well, we're all going to die, so we should prepare for that, especially if we have families. So I help people make those arrangements legally binding. And I also help with the process when somebody has passed away to transfer assets of a deceased person to a living person when there's a will involved or if there is no will. So I help with that legal process that goes through court, and that's called probate. And I do a little bit of guardianship, personal injury, and my main focus, though, is the estate planning and probate, so helping people prepare for their future.
It's kind of a sad topic when we talk about wills. I brought up on the show before, basically, if someone needed like a free will, I knew that you were doing free simple wills and stuff like that. So we actually added it onto the Las Vegas Legal Network app. So if someone wanted a free will, I thought it was a great service to basically do something like that for people, especially during COVID. I think a few months ago when you brought it up, I started offering that to people. I think one or two people just took advantage of it, something new. But the truth is, you never know what's going to happen in the future, and we're going to talk about some celebrities today, right? That basically that didn't really plan for the future. That is a reason why basically you need to be prepared for your future and for your family's future, right? Because you could have a lot of wealth or assets, and you basically want to make sure that gets transferred properly, right?
Correct. And estate planning is more important for people with less money because their families can't afford the mistakes that wealthy people can. So let's say you are an average person and you pass away and you have no plan. Well, your funds will be tied up in probate court if you don't get a trust done or if you don't have proper planning. And a lot of people's families can't afford to have a lot of money tied up in the court system during the pendency of a court action. So, it's important for everybody to get it done, especially if you have children and loved ones that you want to inherit that may not be related to you by marriage or blood. So there's a lot of legal requirements to getting a proper estate plan done And I advise everybody to get at least a will. And I do free simple wills. So there is no reason why an adult should not have at least a will.
Here's a great question. Like, so you're doing these free simple wills. So imagine, let's say I had $50,000 in the bank and an RV, and I passed away today, and I didn't have a will, and I want to acquire that property from, a family member that passed away, let's just say. How much would it cost me to go fight it? Because I would need to hire an attorney if let's say my family member. If my family member had this property and I wanted to try to get it now because they passed away, I would have to hire a lawyer to basically to get it, right?
Go through the probate process.
Probate
Correct.
process. So what would that normal fee be, like just to acquire it?
Okay, so
To get the items that belong to me from family.
the fees
deceased.
range, but like a typical fee on what you're talking about is like $3,000 to $4,000. But I've seen probate fees be over $30,000.
So if I have a simple will, how much money am I saving?
Well, it will still actually have to go through the probate process, but it will avoid the conflicts in court, which will save you money.
Okay.
So it will cut the fee significantly if it's very straightforward. And if it's a simple estate, it will cut the fees typically by half.
Do you need a lawyer? Like if I just had the will set up and someone passed away, can I just show up and say, hey, here's the simple will from my father. There's no other people that basically want anything whatsoever, and I have a simple will. Do I need the attorney? Do I always need a lawyer?
In Nevada, if the property is under $25,000 and it's not real estate, it does not need to go through the court process. There can be what's called an affidavit of entitlement filled out. So like if there's money in a bank account and you have the will and it's under $25,000, the bank will typically let you fill out the paperwork, this affidavit, show the death certificate and the will, and you will get the money. So in that situation, no, you don't need a lawyer.
Okay.
But if it does, for whatever reason, have to go through the court system, technically, you do not need to have a lawyer. You could represent yourself. But the problem is a lot of people don't know what to do. So they hire lawyers because the lawyers know what to do because of their expertise and training.
So in the long run, it's going to save money, or it could be the battle, right? Because it'd be brothers and sisters, or
Yeah.
I think I read, I forgot who it was, one of the celebrities where millions of dollars went towards their cat. The cat.
Oh, Leona Helmsley. Yeah, she left like $12 million to her dog, which was really wacky.
And at the end, I guess they negotiated and went to court, say it was excessive, and then basically that they only gave $2 million for the cat instead of the other $10 million. Instead of the $10 million, went to their grandchildren.
That they disinherited. They split the difference.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because there was no will, I believe, for what's her name again?
Leona Helmsley.
Yeah.
So she had a will. It was real wacky that she left all this money to an animal. I think it was her dog. And
I think it was dog.
yeah. So there was probably a ton of litigation in that case, and I could only imagine what the fees were to try to fight over the money that she left for the dog. But yeah, so sometimes having a will is appropriate and sometimes having a trust is appropriate because the trust will, if it's funded properly and everything is done correctly, it will avoid that court process called probate, and your family will avoid the court fees, the lawyer fees, and they can get immediate access to funds that are in a trust if they're the beneficiary. So.
And I think to the average person that may be listening to this as well, is I think what it comes down to is it gets overwhelming. Even myself, I've been involved like with getting a trust and so on. It gets confusing. I mean, the truth is if you need to hire an attorney, if it's a reasonable fee, it is what it is to protect yourself in the future, especially if you have, a job and so on. At least look for $25,000 and less. If you have the simple will, it's a different story. But especially if you're offering, a free simple will, there's no reason why not to get that done in general to save you some problems in the future. And you could do it at home. How does it work? So I know with our Las Vegas Legal Network, the new network that was set up, basically you can go to lvln.vegas and basically you can click on free will, fill out the information, it emails to basically you, and then what would you do with it? Do they have to come in and have to just like sign an affidavit?
So we would get the information to prepare their will, and I'd prepare their will. We'd set the appointment. They come in. We go over the will. We make sure it's everything they want. And under Nevada law, the will has to be witnessed by two disinterested parties. So 2 of our staff members witness the will. They come in and sign. We give them the original. We scan a copy, and they have a free will. So there's no reason why somebody shouldn't have a will because they're free.
Got it. So the bottom line is it gets notarized by two people that have no interest whatsoever.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So technically, if someone was disabled or older or senior, if we wanted to get two people that were disinterested to sign, I mean, we could technically, a lawyer can go to someone's home and have two people that are,
Yeah. So
sign?
what's interesting?
Because a lot of older people, seniors, Sun City Anthem, stuff like that.
Yeah, they don't want to leave. So this is what could actually be done. Because of technology, it can actually be witnessed through Zoom.
Okay.
So
So they don't have to leave their
person would
home,
be at
Zoom
their
with two other
home.
people.
They would have their will.
Mm-hmm.
The witnesses would be over Zoom. They would confirm the person's identity, confirm that they are wanting to sign the will. They're over the age of 18. They're of sound and disposing mind and memory. And the witnesses can watch via Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. And the individual can sign the will. And then the witnesses could, do a declaration saying that they saw the person sign the will.
Okay. Is that
So
something
that's-
new because of COVID? That just started taking place?
It became more common because of COVID, but technically you could witness something through Zoom. There's no
Okay.
law saying that doesn't count. As long as you see the person sign it, you could see them sign it through FaceTime.
Yeah, I was going to say FaceTime too. Okay, cool. So that's good. So, I mean, basically, if someone's a senior, listens to this as well, and wants to do a free will, it's something that we can set up basically for them.
There's
And they don't have to leave their home.
no prohibition because they're not
Okay,
mobile.
great. All right, so there's no reason why people shouldn't be using the free service. Okay. Well, I appreciate you doing that specifically, especially because I'm working with a lot of seniors these days in Sun City Anthem and Sun City Summerlin. So maybe we'll just get more of that information out to people that if they want the simple will, that it's something. And then if it's more advanced, then you can help them out with other more advanced issues, right?
Yeah, so
What makes the difference between simple and then like getting more advanced? Like, is it just because there's property or real estate? What makes it not simple?
Okay, so what makes the will not simple is if they have a lot of bequests, which are gifts to give to people when they die. If they want to set up a trust in their will, because people don't know, they can set up a standalone trust while they're alive, or they can set up a trust through their will. Mm-hmm. So if they set up the trust in their will, that's not a free simple will. That would be a fee. Mm-hmm. And depending on how complex the trust they want in their will to be. So if it's just, I want to leave XYZ to my kids, my wife, my cousin, I want to name a couple executors, an alternate, things like that, that qualifies for a free simple will.
Okay. All right, that's great. So I know there's a lot of things going on recently as of last night. I don't watch TV as much as I used to, I guess. But I know we have Bill Cosby that was, recently released. I really haven't followed the whole situation. I know we have some different celebrity names. I did some research that basically are people that they probably needed better estate planning with their wills, their trusts, and all that good stuff. So I wrote down a list of basically celebrities, about 10 celebrities, and we're going to go through them today. I'm going to mention their name. Let's talk about them a little bit. Tell us, how they messed up, what they could have done in general. And I thought it'd be a good conversation. So let's just start with like Bill Cosby. I mean, first, I haven't really followed it. So, I mean, I know that you have also a little bit of a criminal defense background.
Yeah.
Give me the scoop, like for people that just don't really watch TV these days.
Yeah. So a few days ago, Bill Cosby was released from prison. His conviction was overturned by the Supreme Court. State Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And the reason is that there were some prosecutorial misdeeds. So basically in the early 2000s, he was accused of sexual assault of a woman by the last name of Constad. The prosecutor at that time said they didn't have enough evidence to charge
In
Bill
2000,
Cosby.
right?
In the early 2000s. It might have
Got
been
it.
2003 or 2004. I can't remember, but it was a while ago. So they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. And they basically stated to this alleged victim that they are not going to charge Bill Cosby with this crime, but she could go after him civilly to pursue justice. So they made a promise to Bill Cosby that if he testified and waived his right to the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination, they would not use that information against him because they were not going to charge him with the crime. So he goes and he does a deposition in the civil case where he got sued for this sexual assault. And for whatever reason, he admitted to using Quaaludes to give to women that he wanted to be intimate with. And so that information came out and he, said some other incriminating things against himself. And
I wonder, did he have a signed document with the criminal, like with the DA, that if he basically, You know what I'm saying? Or just they have a word. You know, I mean, I wonder if it was in writing.
You know, I don't know the details, but it was an agreement. I think it probably was in some certain written communication. It might have been an
so
email.
So he couldn't be charged or technically convicted.
They promised him they wouldn't.
Got it.
They said they weren't going to charge him because they didn't have enough evidence. So then he, you know, goes ahead and he admits to things that he shouldn't have because he waived his right against self-incrimination. Well, there is a transfer of power. There's a new DA in town. So when that new DA becomes elected or appointed, I don't know how they do their DA appointments there, but at any rate, basically a few days before the statute of limitations was up on that sexual assault, they went ahead and charged Bill Cosby based on the statements that he made in the civil case where he admitted to using Quaaludes on women that he wanted to be intimate with. So the court overturned the conviction, and basically they said that when a prosecutor makes an unconditional promise of non-prosecution and when the defendant, meaning Bill Cosby, relies upon that guarantee to the detriment of his constitutional right not to testify, the fairness would have been undermined had he was convicted, but had they let the conviction stay. So basically they said under the due process of the law in our criminal justice system that the original prosecutor's promise be enforced, meaning, you know, not to charge him criminally. So that's what happened. He got out on a technicality, and he really shouldn't have been charged in the first place. But I mean,
you would think, like, even in the civil, like, why would you kind of disclose?
You know, I said the
it's
same.
Nice that he admitted to it, but like, it's a little too much information, probably. You know,
the same thing last night. I was just curious. Why would you admit that? I mean,
I heard he was putting it into the pudding,
into the Jello pops. Yeah. Yeah, so
I just don't know why. I mean, unless you're just getting older and senile, that basically, like, you would start talking about that. Even if you did something like that, people are going to judge you, right? Like, plus you did a criminal act.
Yeah, and I mean, you were under a deposition. Because of that, he ended up settling with the woman who accused him of the sexual assault for like over $3 million. Okay. So now he's out of prison. So now,
how long was he in prison? I think it was like 2 years, right? 2 years.
2 years. So
that's crazy.
Now R. Kelly's calling his lawyer up. Bad joke.
So
you know, R. Kelly's in jail. He needs Bill Cosby's lawyer.
You know, all these celebrities, you know, it's kind of just an interesting, weird situation, you know, with these people. Like, you know, all the things are coming out like later on, especially if the statute of limitations. I mean, I wonder what it was, like 15 years later or something, you know, for Bill Cosby. Okay, so in regards to Bill Cosby, anything, I mean, his a different situation. He didn't pass away. Will's trust, estate plan, anything with him specifically for his future? I mean, now that he's out, I wonder what happened. I mean, I guess for him, nothing with that, right?
Well, you know,
to protect himself, technically, even though
I would hope he has an estate plan. Since he's alive, we don't know because it's confidential. But he's pretty old, so we'll probably know in a few years.
Interesting.
When he's incapacitated or if he passes away.
Especially, right, if you go to prison and something happens, you should still have a will or...
Well, you know what? Most people, this would be relevant to you, to your criminal clients, the defenders. If you go to prison, you need a power of attorney because you are locked up and nobody has the right to handle your affairs. So a person should do a power of attorney appointing an individual to manage their affairs when they're in jail because you might have bank accounts, you might have lawsuits, you might have all kind of things going on and you're in jail, so you're limited in the things you can do. So I would recommend people facing prison time to get a power of attorney, or financial power of attorney. They also have
a limited power of attorney.
They can get a limited power of attorney.
Do you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
that comes in my estate planning portfolio.
Okay, I like that one. Power of attorney, the limited power of attorney.
Yeah.
You know, before when I was working more deeply with the criminal defense law firms, I would send actually a close friend that was a mobile notary, and basically she would go into the prisons and basically do the limited or the power of attorney depending upon the situation, or if it was to get funds out to pay for the criminal defense case. So I think there's only certain people that are allowed actually inside the prisons as well, not just a simple mobile notary. But since she was also an attorney, basically she was able to get inside the prisons to get them signed.
Attorneys
so it's kind of interesting. But I think, look, most people probably the least thing they think about is before they go to prison is like, let me go get a power of attorney. Just God forbid.
But
they should
their
technically.
lawyers should tell them.
No, I mean, just because you never know what the future may be.
Well, you never know what you're going to have going on when you're in jail and you're stuck.
One thing that's interesting in one of the other shows, we had someone, and actually here at the Sticky Paw Studio, they actually have a weekly podcast on Bitcoin currency.
Oh, wow.
And someone actually has called me, from prison, who wanted to pay for legal services to an attorney, and he had Bitcoin. But I don't know if you really know how Bitcoin works, and I'm learning about it, but if you don't have like the secret password,
something
then basically
like that,
you don't screw you to lose the money. So he forgot the secret phrase.
Oh, wow.
And what I said is that we could have basically like the paperwork set up a limited power of attorney, and he wanted to move 1 Bitcoin over to the lawyer to pay for legal services. And then I said we would have a mobile notary go there and sign off that it's a limited power of attorney, and only 1 Bitcoin would be transferred over. Like, it's getting more advanced these days with this Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
But it was kind of interesting because he just didn't know the code, the password, but he wanted to pay for legal services. So trust. Bitcoin currency, people that have these things, especially if you go in, I think that's believe it or not, there's several people that I've spoken to in prison that have Bitcoin, and they talk about it. It's just funny. You think you're in a new world. All right, so next person, so Bill Cosby, he's out. It would be interesting in general, I guess, his future, what happens with him. But interesting lesson, I guess, for the legal community about, the whole civil and criminal. It's kind of like O.J. Simpson, right, where basically he's not guilty for the criminal defense case, but basically civilly, right, there's...
Right, the wrongful death.
The wrongful death, which sounds crazy, right, the civil. And then I think that because of his NFL pension, that they can't collect.
Correct, because I think it's my understanding that money is judgment proof up to a certain amount. So... his pensions are protected from creditors.
I think it's because federal. I don't know why I'm saying federal.
It's through this law called ERISA. Mm-hmm. So it has to do with pension plans and employee benefits and things like that.
But recently I heard, I'm not sure if you heard this one, from the Cosmopolitan. There was a lawsuit with O.J. Simpson, and he won money, and it was like $20,000 or $30,000, and then that wasn't protected, so that money went to the family.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
I think it was like 2 weeks ago that I happened to see it, and I got a little bit educated about it. But the money that he won from a small suit for like defamation of character, basically the money went to the family. I wonder, it'd be interesting to look up for a future episode. I wonder if any money has been paid to Nicole Simpson's family at all. Do you know about that at all?
I don't know.
I'm just throwing that out there. It'd be interesting to know like any of that money, but I know it was 20 to 30 grand. But no one wants to lose a loved one.
Right.
But it is weird when there's a criminal defense case and you're not guilty, but they win civilly, which means like that enough information civilly to say that he did do it, and then he owes the money, but he's still living in Las Vegas,
living a high life,
living at Jing and all these
living
different places.
La Vida Loca.
So but it's a crazy situation. But with him, that he's protected, I believe, with the whole federal whatever law it is. Jimi Hendrix is another person, basically a celebrity as well. What's the story with him? I know nothing about these people except one maybe on the list.
Okay, so I actually watched that channel called Reels. Have you ever heard of the channel Reels? I've heard of it. They talk a lot about celebrities. So a lot of the people on this list, I've seen these like documentaries on them and their life, and then how their estate plan went wrong and things like that. So Jimi Hendrix, great guitar player, died of a drug overdose, young guy, I think he was 27. Untimely death, no estate plan, no will, nothing. So he passes away, and his dad inherits a lot of the money, almost all of it. It's because of laws of intestate succession. So if you die with no will, the state where you die will determine who's going to get your money. So his dad was up in line because Jimmy didn't have a wife or kids. He gains control of the estate. His dad ends up dying, and then his stepsister receives the money. It's like about $30 million, I think. His biological brother was not entitled to any money due to these intestate laws in the state where he died. Anyways, there was a big fight. They were fighting. His sister, biological sister, and his stepbrother were fighting for over 30 years over control of the estate and the money. And after 30 years, they came up with some settlement. But
30 years?
30 years. So you can imagine what the legal fees are for 30 years of litigation. And, just
Did they get the $30 million while they're fighting it? Because they're in a
no,
better...
because the money, if you're in a dispute in court, in probate court, the money is tied up. So they're not
So
getting...
it's sat for 30 years, the $30 million.
Correct.
When do they get interest?
Well, I think that it depends where the money's being held. If the money's like in an account, yeah, they'll get interest. But I think a bulk of the money was like his IP, so his songs and, his intellectual property. So yeah, it was unfortunate. He didn't have a will, and the money ends up with people that probably shouldn't have gotten the money. So because his stepsister got the money and not even his real brother at the end of the day because his dad died.
It's crazy that it sat there for 30 years fighting. But the funny thing is the biological brother that's fighting for the money. I mean, you really need money to have an attorney to keep fighting this, right? But I guess that $30 million was worth an attorney to do that contingency.
Yeah, they're doing that on contingency, or they're getting the fees paid out of the estate. So he didn't really have to come up with a retainer. But.
How does that work?
So
if someone's fighting it, that they can come out of the...
So if you're a lawyer in a case... in a probate case, if you're representing the estate and you're doing legal work on behalf of the estate, your fees can be paid from the estate. Mm-hmm. So your money's going to come off top before creditors, before the beneficiaries, before the heirs. So lawyers are going to stand in line to take this case if they're representing the estate because they know there's a lot of money and they're going to be entitled to their fees first.
But the biological son, right?
Brother, yeah.
The brother, basically, doesn't he need money to have a lawyer to fight?
Well,
or the probate lawyer is the one that's trying to represent both of them?
No, I assume he would have gotten his own lawyer, and that lawyer would have taken it on contingency.
Just because there's so much money in the account.
Correct.
It was worth the gamble.
And they came up with some settlement, so I'm sure the lawyer got a nice chunk of that.
If you don't mind, a lot of people that are listeners don't really understand contingency. What I want to share is basically, and then you could jump in with a contingency, the definition of exactly. But, when you go to a lot of lawyers, basically they want money for a retainer where they work off of the hourly basis or a flat fee.
Correct.
When it's contingency is when?
Contingency means that it's contingent on the lawyer winning the case, and it's an agreed upon amount percentage when you enter into the agreement with the lawyer. So standard contingency is 33 1/3% if there's no litigation, 40 to 50% if there has to be a lawsuit filed. And a lot of people go that route because they don't have the money up front to pay the lawyer the fees.
Can there be a hybrid where it's contingency, but if they lose, then you owe them $5,000 or $10,000?
Yeah, so it can be a hybrid because, the lawyer and the client can enter into, it's an agreement and it's negotiable. So some lawyers will do, $5,000 and then X percent because let's say the lawyer's going to have costs come out, incur costs.
So it can always be a hybrid. And this is for cases that are like probate or personal injury.
Yeah, so there's ethical rules where lawyers cannot do contingency in family law cases. So that's never going to be a contingency case.
So that's going to be like flat fee or hourly fee.
Correct.
Okay. That's good to know. It's always good to hear a definition. I think a lot of people just talk about this stuff, but they don't really fully understand or know that's a hybrid. Because I know a lot of people that I speak to, like, I want a lawyer to do this. I want to sue this person. I want to sue that person. And I'm like, do you have money for financial services to pay for legal? Do you have money to pay for legal services? They say no. Like, why can't they take in contingency? I'm like, well, the lawyers have to pay for the electricity and the lights and employees, and they can't always afford to do that. Some can, some can't. And if your case is a good case, or you're suing an insurance company, or if there's $30 million in a trust or a will that you're fighting or contesting, and it's a different situation that sometimes the attorney is willing to take a little bit of a risk.
Correct. So, higher the risk, higher the reward.
True. Okay. So Jimi Hendrix, so just to recap, so the things that he should have done differently was?
Well, he was a young guy. He was doing drugs. He probably didn't think he needed a will, but number one, he should have had a will. Well, really and truly, he should have had a trust because that would have avoided probate. But at the very least, he should have had a will naming who he wanted his executor to be and naming who he wanted to inherit his estate and who would inherit his estate should the original people, predecease him.
Okay. All right. So next person on the list is DMX, which recently passed away. A lot of people were really upset because he's been around the block for a while. A rapper, singer in general. And then I know that
Actor too.
A lot of movies. What with DMX? What's his situation? Because I know he had like a girlfriend or a common law. What do you call it? Common law girlfriend or?
Yeah. So he was married for a while. He got divorced. He has apparently a lot of children. I don't know how many children he has, but he has children, I think, with his ex-wife and some other women. And then he became engaged to a woman that he dated for, I don't know, I think it was like 7 years. So he did not create a will while he was alive or a trust. He had no estate plan, which is unfortunate because, you know, he had the funds to do it and probably had a lot of lawyers around him that would advise him to do so, but he didn't do it. So when you don't have a will, I mentioned earlier that the state creates laws about who's going to get your money if you don't create a will. Those are called intestate statutes. And in New York and most states, if you are not married to a person or related to them by blood, you are not going to inherit their property if they don't leave a will. So he did not marry this girlfriend or fiance. They were only dating. So under the law, because he had no will, she was not entitled to inherit any of his property. So she tried to petition the court to be a common law wife, and the court rejected that, and they upheld the statutes saying basically she inherits nothing because he did not have a will. And so the money, I believe, is all going to go to his children now because he was divorced.
All to the children, nothing to
The girlfriend that he was with forever.
Was it 6 or 8 years or longer?
I think it was like 7 years, but yeah, it's unfortunate. That leads us into our next guy on the list, Barry White, same situation. We all know Barry White. He was actually married at the time of his death, but he was estranged from his wife. And he had a girlfriend of a while. And he had children with that girlfriend. So Barry White died, no will. His wife ends up inheriting everything. He was estranged from her, just never got legally divorced. And the girlfriend that he was with and lived with and had children with, well, actually, I need to tweak that. He didn't have children with her. She said she had children with him, but they later did a paternity test and he wasn't the dad. Anyways, so the estranged wife ends up inheriting all the money. And I'm sure he didn't want that because they were estranged.
I wonder how long they were married.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But basically, there was at the end there was no children that were related to him. I wonder. If
he had children, but
Not
the child with the woman, the girlfriend, that wasn't his child.
That wasn't. I wonder if he knew that.
I don't think he knew that because they did a paternity test after
right?
he died. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I gotta look into that one more. I wonder how old the child was or how long, you know.
I think the child was under 18 when all this happened.
So at the end, they do the test, and basically it's not even his child.
Right.
And he passed away. He doesn't even know.
Yeah. So.
Must have been mailman or something. Well, it wasn't Amazon then. It was these. I always joke around saying that my kids may look like the mailman, but maybe it's the Amazon.
Amazon, yeah, nowadays, yeah.
But yeah, definitely mailman back in the day. All right, so Barry White, basically, the goal with him is that he should have had a will.
He should have had a trust.
Trust.
But
is trust prevalent back in the day? Is it more of a newer thing?
Trusts are newer now. They have been around for a long time. They've been around during English common law. So over 100 years, they've been around. Okay. But a lot of people didn't know about it. But because of technology, the internet, things like that, people are more savvy.
More educated about it.
Educated about things. So he should have had a trust.
So question for you, when I keep saying will, you always say trust first. Is it always trust first, then the will? Or the will?
No.
Trust should be in the will?
No. So depending on your assets, the type of assets you have and the amount will determine if you need a will or a trust. People that are very wealthy and famous need a trust because, number one, they're going to want to avoid probate. Probate is public, so people know how you died. Your death certificate gets submitted to court. They know who your heirs are. They know how much money you leave, and they know who's getting what. So
if you don't have it in a trust. Correct. So do you set up the trust first, and then you put and then you set up a will, and then you put the trust in the will?
No. So what you do if your assets are appropriate and your family dynamics are appropriate for a trust, you go to a lawyer like myself, and if you need to reach
Larissa
me,
the Lawyer.
Yeah, you can call 702-258-3034.
Larissa the Lawyer.
Yeah, and we set up your trust, and we do what's called a pour over will. So we execute all your documents at the same time. We do your trust, your will, your financial power of attorney, your healthcare directive, and we fund your trust, and we do a HIPAA release for people to get your medical records.
So when you do the trust, you're avoiding probate tax?
You're avoiding probate court.
Probate court. You're
As
skipping
long
probate
as your
court.
trust is properly funded. So you could think of your trust as a box. You put your assets in the box while you're alive, and if all your assets are in the box when you die, it will not go through probate court. If you don't put your assets in the trust, then there'll be assets in your name when you die, and court is required because once you're dead, you need a court order to switch those assets over to a living person. So if you die and you own a house and you don't have a trust, it has to go through court because you can't sign the deed to give it to your kids. The court order substitutes a signature.
So how
by the dead
expensive is
person.
for someone to set up a trust? Am I saying this right? On a trust that's going to be in your will?
To do your estate plan, which would include all the documents I mentioned. So the fees vary. For me, my fees start at about $3,000 for a full estate planning portfolio. And those fees increase as the complexity increases. So I could set up asset protection trusts, do sub-trusts, do a lot of different things in how you want your estate crafted. There are lawyers in town that may do it for cheaper, and there are lawyers in town that do it for more. So I advise people, do your research, meet the lawyer, see their process, see if you
what makes
guys
them
click.
comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a good fit.
One thing I always share with people in general, especially with, paying for legal services, a lot of times there's different payment plans or, like a lot of people waiting for wills or trusts. I mean, unless if there's no emergency and you want to do a payment plan, I'm sure that eventually, like, hey, if you pay $250 a month and in 6 months you could start working on the process, like do a payment plan, and then you'll start working on it once you hit a certain amount of money or something like that. If you really want to use a certain attorney and you basically want to set the process, but maybe just make some payments and then you start the process when there's a certain amount of money that's set up in the account. Like some people just don't have the $3,000 right now.
Right. Yeah. That's a steep price, but it's worth it because you're saving your family and yourself a lot of money in the long run and heartache and just a lot. But you have the legal financing company, right?
Yeah, there's some different legal financing companies, but the one thing that I'll share is like a lot of some lawyers don't have legal financing.
Okay.
But I'm saying that anybody that wants an attorney that does wills, trusts, estates planning, of course, we would tell them to contact you. Or
I accept payment plans.
So, like I said, I always say if you're dealing with a good attorney, a good lawyer that wants to help people, that there's always a way of doing a payment plan. Just legal services may not start right away.
Right, and you don't want to base who you're going to use as your lawyer on price because you are paying for these services and you want to make sure they're done right. So whatever money you pay, you want to make sure you get it done right. You could pay a lower fee, let's say $1,000. There's law firms in town that maybe do it cheaper, but if they don't do it right, it's worthless. So then you just paid $1,000, $800 for a stack of papers that do nothing when you need it. So when I do my estate plans, I make sure they work. I make sure your trusts are funded. I make sure that it's set up properly. I make sure your money's protected. I make sure that your family's protected. Most importantly, I make sure that you're protected in the event that you become incapacitated. A trust avoids guardianship. So there's a lot of nuances in the law and things like that. I've been doing estate planning since 2014, and prior to that, I was a trust officer and I managed trust funds for Wells Fargo. So I basically read a lot of trusts that people set up before they died, and then when they died, they named Wells Fargo Bank to manage all the assets and the money. So I saw the mistakes that a lot of lawyers made, and I learned from that job what to do, what not to do when you have a trust.
You said with Wells Fargo, did you actually work for Wells Fargo?
Yeah, I worked for Wells Fargo Wealth Management. Yep, I worked there. They have an office in Las Vegas on Rainbow and 215.
And your job was what, to go through?
I was a trust officer. So basically we read the trust. We set up the payments to the beneficiaries. We made sure the money was invested properly.
So you saw the mistakes were like, hey, we can't do this beneficiary thing because the trust wasn't set up correctly, or right?
Yeah, or if it was, if it was vague or ambiguous, we'd have to,
bringing attention to like legal counsel.
We'd have to actually go to court and get clarification on it, and that costed money.
Okay.
And, different things like that. So that's actually how I got into estate planning.
So how long were you a Wells Fargo trust officer?
I was there for 1 year.
Got it. So I'm sure you saw a lot, basically, of the mistakes that people have made.
Yeah.
So when you talk about other attorneys, one thing I share with people all the time is when you're looking for an attorney, I always say there's 3 R's, which is reviews, results, and reputation. So basically, when you're looking for an attorney, someone like Larissa, you can find her online or Facebook, social media, Avo, all these different websites, and basically do your due diligence before you find an attorney and make sure you feel comfortable. Because I know sometimes when they meet certain attorneys, they'll say, you know what, I really didn't like the person, or they seem like they didn't really care. Well, then, you should find someone that you think that cares. Maybe you just their attitude, which is a little bit different. Maybe they're from the South or from the East or who knows where, So I always say you should interview 2-3 people, make sure you feel comfortable. And if you feel comfortable and work out the money situation as well. But the bottom line is you definitely need to be protected. In this situation, when we talk about protection, it's that wills, trust, estate planning, probate. These things can cost a lot of money for your family in the future, hence these celebrities that we're dealing with. Next person is Jim Morrison. What's the story with him?
Oh, yeah. I actually watched his story on Reels. So he's an interesting guy. He was a playboy. Did you know anything about him?
I think just a little research back.
He was pretty wild.
Got it.
He died pretty young. I think he was in his 20s. Mm-hmm. He actually had a will. And the mistake that he made, well, I'll tell you what happened and then we'll talk about his mistakes. He had a will. He named his longtime girlfriend as the beneficiary of his estate. I think it was around $30 million. So because he had a will and not a trust, it went through probate. His money was tied up before his girlfriend got it. It was stuck in court. She was destitute. I think she started prostituting herself because she had no money. Anyways, she ends up dying too. Young age, maybe, I don't know, in her 20s. So she dies. She was the heir of his estate. She dies. She had no will. So guess where that money ends up? With her parents. With his girlfriend's parents, not his own family. Because she didn't have a will, the state laws say if you die with no will, it's going to go to your family. She didn't have a husband. She didn't have kids. So it goes to her parents. Money goes there. His parents, Jim Morrison's parents, then sue, and that ends up in litigation for many, many years. They come up with a settlement. I think they split it in half. Nonetheless, his girlfriend's parents should have never gotten any of his money. It should have been, he could have set up a trust, named the girlfriend, and said, if she dies, I want to name XYZ. I want to name Charity. I want to name my other girlfriend because he had a lot. So,
well, it's nice that he had a lot of extra girlfriends. There's nothing wrong with extra girlfriends. You just add it in the trust, probably a few extra dollars, right? Different beneficiaries. Yeah. Beneficiary A, B, C, D, right? If this one passes, goes to the next girlfriend.
Exactly.
But,
you name your favorite first.
I mean, probably who do you think ever would think that, my girlfriend's going to die, I'm going to die, she's going to die next, and then basically where the money's going to go?
A lot of people don't think that, but that's why they need a good lawyer because
the lawyer's supposed to think that out a little bit.
The lawyer is supposed to go through every scenario. Mm-hmm. And I always say, hey, if all the people that you want to inherit your money end up dead, who are your contingent beneficiaries? Meaning, if all the people you want are gone, who ultimately should get it? And a lot of times they'll name charities, and that's fine. But you need to have contingencies because things happen. So, he might not have thought that the girlfriend was going to die, but they could have died together.
Yeah, car accident, something like
Anything like that, yeah.
I'm thinking, the problem solver? Who's the intellectual property? Does it go to Kyle? Does Kyle become the predecessor of the problem solver?
Yeah, you need to get him a shirt called the Problem Solver Number 2.
Number 2.
No, he's a problem maker.
Problem maker?
Yeah.
Today in the car, we were driving back from camp. I was teaching him. I asked my kids today if they want to be a lion or if they want to be a sheep.
And?
I think one of the girls said sheep. They probably like the sheep because it's fur, but I'm teaching them that they should be the lion.
Yeah.
Especially because one of the kids basically was saying how they were kind of being bullied, but in a positive bully. One of the girls basically said that the girl always wants to be with me and doesn't want me to be with any other people, to the other girls.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm saying that you're a lion. You do what you want to do. You're a lion. So in the car, I'm playing this lion roars, and I'm like, who are you, a lion or you a sheep? So one of the girls is saying, hey, I want to be a sheep still. And then Kyle's doing the roar. So I'm trying to teach the kids to be a lion.
You know who would be with my kids? I'd say, do you want to be a shark? Because my kid's obsessed with baby shark.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to do some paperwork to get the intellectual property to the problem solver, to Kyle Jacobs, so he continues the legacy of the problem solver.
Yes.
The legacy of Las Vegas is the problem solver. All right, so anything else with Jim Morrison? Basically, will, no trust. Your lawyer basically has to think it through in the future, make a list of people. God forbid that you, your family, everybody was in a car and passed away, God forbid, knock on wood, but basically if that happened,
You need to
where
name
do you want that money to go to?
contingent beneficiaries if that person ends up deceased.
Again, whether it's $10,000, $50,000, a house. I mean, the average person probably owns a house and a car, as the biggest asset. But even a house could be, $200,000, $500,000. So,
Yeah.
Once you liquidate that home, it's worth some money. And, we talk about generational wealth when we talk about real estate and other things in general. But the bottom line is even a home, if it's $200,000-$300,000, that can be a big difference for any family, right?
That's a big deal. Yeah.
So again, even though when we're talking about these topics, a lot of people think, oh, it's only the wealthy people. It's not really true.
No.
Every person really should have a will or set up for the future. A will minimum. Trust is the next step.
Trust is the next step. Trust we recommend if you own a home or if you have minor children, a lot of assets, or if you want to have more control over the money when you die, you get a trust because you can make that money stretch for a long time and you can put contingencies on people receiving that money, things like that. But yeah, Jim Morrison, that was pretty sad.
That's crazy that the family, it's funny we talk about it right now, but could you imagine if you were like in the home of, the Jim Morrison's girlfriend's family, knowing that they were going to get $30 million, like, could you imagine the conversation in their home? Like, we're going to fight it, like, we want the money,
Of course.
I mean, like, kind of greed sets it. I mean, unless they were in love with Jim Morrison being the boyfriend of their daughter or something like that. But, I guess crazy story. All right, next person, Kurt Cobain. What's the story with Kurt?
Kurt, we all know what happened to Kurt,
Kurt was drugs, right?
He was on drugs and then he shot himself. I think he was on heroin, but we all remember Nirvana from the 90s.
I used to have the CD.
I like Nirvana. I haven't listened to them for a while, but yeah, that was my fun days in the 90s. But yeah, he had no will, went through probate court, public process. He was married at the time.
There's a picture on the screen there.
Oh, yeah, Kurt.
All right,
He was married to Courtney Love. She's a rock star too.
Okay.
A little wacky. There was fights between his wife and then his daughter over the intellectual property. A lot of drama. His daughter, I think's name is Frances Bean. She ultimately has ended up with a bulk of the estate, but I believe her mom was like, misappropriating some of her money, and it was just a bad situation. So he had the money to get an estate plan done. Him and the wife, Courtney Love, they were both whacked out. So he could have named somebody a little more responsible to be in charge of the money for his daughter if anything were to happen to him. Name a trustee, and basically it could have avoided a lot of lost money to lawyers, because I'm imagining the legal fees in that case were at least in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. So if he had it set up right in the first place, it would have saved his family that money in the long run.
So where'd the money go at the end?
It got split between the wife and the daughter, but the daughter ended up getting a bulk. But there was a lot of litigation in between.
Okay. Marilyn Monroe, favorite.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe, another untimely death, drugs. I think she overdosed from sleeping pills, right?
I think so.
So she actually had a will. What she did in the will was named her business manager to be the beneficiary, and she entrusted him to make the disbursements to the people and charities that she wanted. And I see that a lot. When I'm doing these free wills, what people will do is, like, if they have a minor child, they'll say, I give all my money to, like, my brother or whoever, and then they can, like, give the money to my kid. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Because if you put in the will that the money goes to this person, it goes to that person.
They can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want with it. You're hoping that they give the money to your kid, but they might not. And even if they have the best of intentions, if you give the money to that person, there's other problems, even if they're not shady. Number one, once they get the money, it becomes theirs, so their creditors can attack that money. And number two, if they die, that money will go according to their will, if they have a will, or if they have no will, state laws, then your money can end up with somebody you don't know or don't like or whatever, and it doesn't end up with your kid. So I tell people, in wills, don't give money to somebody and hope they give it to the person you want.
Have it set up in advance.
Yeah, if you have a minor, set up a trust. And then people do that on life insurance too. So anyways, that's my little thing on that. So Marilyn Monroe leaves the money to this person. He ends up not giving it to the charities for whatever reason. I don't know if he's being shady or greedy or what. But then he dies, and the money then ends up with his wife, who Marilyn Monroe never even knew. So all her money ends up with this stranger because of an estate planning faux pas.
Crazy. Okay, Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger had a will, no trust. I don't know why these people don't have trust, but he got a trust done, or excuse me, he got a will done, and he named his parents as the beneficiaries. But then he had a child, and he never updated the will. So then he dies, and he names, the parents inherit the money. But this is actually a good story. His parents were named the beneficiaries, but they said, we are going to leave all the money to his child. So even though he didn't update his will, it's not as sad of a story as all the other ones.
Okay. What about Prince, famous Prince?
Yeah, Prince, he died, no will, no estate plan, nothing. So
Zero.
Nope. He was married prior to his death, but he got divorced, and then he had a child, but the child died like as an infant. So he had no what we call in the law progeny, no children. Mm-hmm. He dies, and his parents are deceased, no will. So according to the laws of the state, his half siblings are now the heirs to his estate, and he was estranged from them. They were like his dad's kids from like all these other women. So now all that money is going to these people he didn't know, and I'm sure he didn't want that, but he didn't get an estate plan done.
I don't know the story. Was he married at the end? Ever married?
He was married in the 90s, but he got divorced.
And do you have kids?
He had a baby, but the baby died like when the baby was like 10 days old.
Oh.
So his siblings are still in court fighting over the estate, and I think the legal fees are already in the millions. So...
All right, the last one basically I think we have is Michael Jackson is the last one on the list in general. I mean, it's interesting just that all these people basically wills, trust. I mean, some of the people I think back in the day, different people, maybe I can understand where they didn't have trust, maybe it wasn't as big of a deal, which we mentioned before. But now, today, wills and trust go together in general. What's the story with Michael Jackson?
So Michael Jackson actually took the appropriate steps and got a full estate plan. He got a trust and he got a will and he appointed guardians for his kids. But the problem was he went to a lawyer that didn't fund his trust for him. So I mentioned the trust being that box. Mm-hmm. He didn't put anything in his box, so it didn't protect his estate from probate. Mm-hmm. So his I think he put in his will that he wanted like his business managers to be the executor, and then he named his mom as the guardian of his children, and he left the money to his kids. And so the estate ends up going through probate, which takes a long time, public. The IRS gets involved because it's a court case. Other creditors are involved, a lot of money at stake, and his mom was, contesting these other people being the executor. They were charging excessive fees, things like that. So basically, he did the right thing, but he didn't go to the right lawyer. So you got to make sure you go to the right lawyer when you get your estate plan done, because they will make sure that your trust gets funded and it will avoid probate court and taxes and things like that.
Just to recap, when you say funded, explain it again, that it wasn't funded properly.
Meaning he didn't rename his assets in the name of the trust, because that's what you have to do. So like if you get a trust and you own a home, you have to redo the deed and put the name of your...
So like with real estate, right? You actually have to say the trust name, right?
On the deed. Like, or if you own LLCs, you have to transfer the LLC to the trust. You have to reopen your bank accounts in the name of trust if you have intellectual property.
You have to fully engulf it into that trust.
Yeah, and your lawyer should do those things for you. So
it's like taking all the items, all the assets, and basically placing it into the trust. But
exactly.
technically, it's legal paperwork that actually converts it into the box.
Exactly, yes.
Right, okay.
And unfortunately, like a lot of lawyers don't do that. And they expect their clients to do.
They forget, or they...
It's the old model. So they're going off of.
They tell people, hey, you have to go do it yourself, transfer it over, right?
Yeah, and it's a
And
broken.
most people just don't do it.
It's a broken system. So
Like if you don't do it, the person's not going to do it. Also, it's a way of saving money because if you could charge, I mean, I have a trust as well, and there's some things that need to be changed with it.
Right.
But what happens is the fees, I think, got expensive. So it's like, you know what, I can do it or I can duplicate it. And sometimes things have to be in a trust in order to be there for a certain period of time, in order to be, what's the word? Like seasoned?
Oh, for asset protection trust. Correct.
So
Yeah,
it has
it's
to
like
be there for
2
like 2
years.
years, right?
Yeah, for asset
So
protection.
my main thing is, all right, to save some money, like I'll just duplicate the paperwork. I'll do it myself. And then you never ended up doing it, and then it's not
Yeah.
seasoned. And the problem is you have to pay the money. And if, look, these things cost money. I mean, legal services cost money. So if you want to do it, you got to do it right. And that's one of the mistakes even that I made is that I had the trust, but some of the things that need to be seasoned, I figured, hey, I'll save some money if I take some real estate and I'll do it myself, the paperwork, But the truth is you just got to make sure it gets done. And that's one of my faults is try to save some money, cut a little corner, and then it wasn't done properly. So I have a trust, but meanwhile, if you don't fund it,
If you don't
what's
fund
so good
it,
about having the trust?
it's just pieces
It's an
of
empty
paper.
trust, right?
Yeah, it's just pieces of paper. So yeah, so like, what I do with my clients is I help them fund it, and if they want to save money on fees, they can try to do it themselves. But I check in with my clients.
That's
so
good. That's
I have a
important.
system where I will check in. If it's not funded within 2 months, they're probably not going to do it. So then we agree, hey,
You'll take
I'm
it over?
going to do it for you. But I do check in because it's important. I've seen so many problems from unfunded trusts. And like the most recent was like sad. It was like sickening. This couple, they created a trust and they didn't fund it. And it was a husband and a wife, and the husband had a son from a prior relationship. So it was his stepmom and his dad. For whatever reason, they didn't fund the trust. So when the dad dies, everything ends up going to the mom because they owned it as joint tenants with right of survivorship. So upon his death, automatically goes to the wife. For whatever reason, she ends up leaving. She's died. It's the estate's a little over $5 million. And about like 1.5 million is going to her siblings who are older. And then she left like most of that money with like these apartments in California to her grandkids, which are the original husband's son, who the husband would have wanted to inherit the money. But he ends up getting like 12% of it, and his kids end up getting most of it. And in their original trust, the dad says, my son should get, X amount, which is a significant amount. He doesn't get it because they never funded their trust. So it's sad. Yeah.
So we have a few minutes left, basically. I think it was great to go over this list in general from learning from other mistakes. I think the biggest we learned is A, you need a will. B, most likely you need a trust if you have a house or residential property or anything of
minor
great-
children, because you don't want to
Minor
leave
children.
assets to minors because it gets locked up in guardianship court.
Got it. So the will, the trust is important. And then also another third thing is just funding that trust. That if you have property, you have to do it properly.
Yeah.
Trying to cut corners, which I think I think it's important to follow through and work out a deal with the attorney that's working on it to make sure that you take action. Because a lot of people, right, you get busy, your life for children, and then you basically forget to fund the trust, or you don't do the paperwork, or you think you're going to do yourself. So I just think that the biggest thing is find an attorney that you're happy with, someone like Larissa the Lawyer here, and basically just be in it to win it, do everything. If you need a payment plan, work things out with the attorney. If things are tight, especially right now, the last 18 months, financially people are in like a little bit more tough times. No matter what, you're offering basically to do a free, simple one. I really appreciate you doing that for anybody that basically comes from the problem solver, specifically in Clark County. Basically right now, the show is basically in Las Vegas and Henderson, North Las Vegas and Clark County, but the state of Nevada as well. So I appreciate you doing that in general. I like to have you, in the future back on the show, maybe talk about some other things, maybe next time we could talk about some other tips and stuff like that. We could talk about a little bit of guardianship in the future, probate a little bit, but the bottom line is that you're here to help, and basically they just need to reach out and basically make the phone call to you. Again, it's Larissa Drahobitzer,
Yes.
attorney at law in general. And again, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Is anything, before we finish up the show, any last minute things that you want to add or tips or any strategies for some of the people that are listening? Especially during I guess right now with COVID, ending, or I understand this Delta,
Yeah.
what's any other tips?
Take advantage of the free simple will. If you need to buy or sell a home, call Camellia.
Okay. There
Call
you go.
Camellia.com. And then we can place that home in the trust.
Okay.
So if you buy a home from Camellia, we'll put your home in the trust. It'll avoid probate, and your family will be protected.
Got it. There's a shout out for my wife, which is ColeCamellia.com, who does real estate locally in town. So I appreciate that from Larissa the Lawyer. Anyway, so again, I am David Kohlmeyer with the Problem Solver Show every single week. Basically, we have amazing people like Larissa on the show, people that are basically sharing their knowledge, their experience, and giving strategies and tips to basically help people. The goal today specifically is to the solving the problem aspect is basically that we don't want you to have problems in the future. So solving the problem would be to have an attorney like Larissa basically helping you get yourself set up with estate planning and a will. She's offering basically a free simple will, which is something that any of the listeners or viewers should partake in. You can go to the network of lawyers that we have, the Las Vegas Legal Network, which is www.lvln.vegas. You can click on free will, and basically we can help basically set that up, and Larissa can basically help out. Any problems in regards to employment, housing, counseling, anything whatsoever out there, you can go to theproblemsolver.vegas, which is an app which is full of resources. We're also working with the different nonprofits like United Way, Catholic Charities, anyone that there should be nobody that's out there, whether it's food or being homeless. I mean, there's so many different places these days in Las Vegas that you can get shelter, and there's food distribution still taking place as well. So whatever I can do to help, please go to theproblemsolver.vegas. You can call me 24/7. I answer the phone as if it's 911. So you can call me at 702-400-7474. Again, I'm David Kohlmeyer, the Problem Solver. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.